Well, there's so many challenges in addressing violence against women in multi-ethnic societies, especially those where they have religious law. In Nigeria, where I'm from, in the northern part, we have religious law, Islamic law, governing the society. And in the southern part, we have Muslims and we have Christians, but we have a civil code, so which is different. So in the southern part, it's much easier to challenge violence against women. My organization in Nigeria offers, we started first with the Vagina Monologues, and we have many groups in Nigeria that practice polygamy. My family, for example, my father had 4 wives. He's a Muslim. He has died now, so he was a Muslim, but he had 4 wives. And so you can, and we're 19 children, there are a lot of children, but I never saw my parents talk about sex. So trying to have the Vagina Monologues performed in Nigeria was really a very bold move. But I thought we needed to do something bold to really begin to challenge the way that women are perceived and the way that women are treated in Nigeria. In southern Nigeria, we could do it. We had the show in Lagos, the most populous, one of the most populous states in Nigeria, with about 15 million people. And we talked about it on radio. It's a big deal. We've been doing this for about 8 years in Nigeria now. And we will be able to take the show to Ghana. But actually, because I saw that they received the Vagina Monologues, people laughed, but the language was too strong for us. So we had to craft our own language. So we have something we call the V Monologues, the Nigerian Story, where we take stories of Nigerian women on violence done to them within the family space or experiences of sexual violations. And we use those stories now, which the language is more conducive, I think, to our society. Now, trying to bring the project to Nigeria, to all parts of Nigeria, I finally stopped in the very middle of Nigeria in a state called Abuja, which is our federal capital, our political center. I couldn't go further north because once you move further north, you're going into more Muslim and very strongly conservative Muslim territory, where the legislative code is the Sharia law. And we just felt that this was too big a risk to take. For example, in northern Nigeria, when Nigeria was going to host the Miss World competition, one of the journalists wrote a story about the Prophet of Islam and said, after all, he had multiple wives, and essentially saying that he would have appreciated beautiful women. And this caused riots and killings in northern Nigeria. So I really felt that you can't just take this risk. But in southern Nigeria, up to the Abuja, where we've been able to take the play, it's already causing change in the way people talk about violence against women. And it's really unfortunate that there's such rigidity in the farther north parts of the country, so that there's not the space to bring this issue to the public, because that's what a play does, is that it brings the issue to the public, and the public can discuss it, and they can say, women too, they go too far sometimes, you have to push and keep them in line, and somebody else can say, but really, do you have to keep them in line by violence? I mean, you can open the space for a conversation that brings the opportunity for change, and we've not had that opportunity yet in the North.
Do you see any less dramatic way to perhaps broach the subject rather than bringing the Vagina Monologues up there?
So in terms of looking for less dramatic ways to broach the subject of violence against women in northern part of Nigeria, I'm actually thinking that it's not so much, now we don't even offer the Vagina Monologues. Now we have the V Monologues, the Nigerian Story, which includes stories of women from northern Nigeria. Now, because northern Nigeria actually is guided by very strict religious principles, the Islamic principles and Islamic law, women and men actually do not interact in the same spaces usually. Women have their own spaces, and then men have their own spaces. And I think we actually could take the V Monologues there. It's just that we can't do public performances as we do in southern parts of Nigeria. What we will do in northern Nigeria is that in the private domain of the female sections of households, because the females have their own sections of their household. We would do the performance and we would have conversations between women. And so it's kind of like kitchen table performances. And then we have to find, very much like how Shakespeare was performed in England in Shakespeare's time, men would do the performances in male sections, and this would open the space for the dialogue. I think that we would have to pilot it carefully, working with very well-respected northern Muslim men and women that agree to do it, and just to see how well the society receives it, because you want to push the envelope, but you do not want to push it too far, because you do not want the backlash that we've seen sometimes in the north.
Culture is certainly a same part of the answer that you were just talking about in terms of Muslim law, but what role does culture play in violence against women, and how can you use it in a sense to help change attitudes?
The culture contains in it many. Culture plays an extremely important role in addressing the issue of violence against women. And I think that the mistake that women make is to simply restate what the patriarchal culture says to us about the rights of men in relation to women. So in Nigerian society, we're often told that the man is the head of the household, and it's his place to provide the lessons, the teachings about how his household would function. And so within those rights, it is his place, if the woman steps out of line, to bring her back within the framework of how he wants his household to run. And that allows him to beat his wife when necessary. So we have this within the culture, and women often say, when they see a case of violence against women, they don't say this is wrong. They say, well, the man, it's his right, and you as a woman must know how you behave. Don't do anything that will provoke a man. Now, culture also says that women are highly respected as mothers and as wives, that they have a very important role to play in the transmission of culture, in providing the groundwork upon which the family's life is built. So we often ask women, if this is true, that women have such an important role, how can we allow women to have violence visited upon them? Because this is a violation of women. It's a kind of an attack on the woman, who is supposed to be the person that's promoting the culture. And because, another group in African societies, all African societies, that are highly respected are the elders, the parents, and others that are elders. Now, we point out that, in our society, it's completely unheard of to attack an elder. It's completely unheard of to slap your mother. But and mothers are the same. But if a man gets provoked by his wife, it's completely all right for him to beat his wife because she has provoked him. But when he's provoked by his parents, why is it not all right for him to beat his parents? Why is it mandatory that the man observes self-control and self-mastery, even where he has been provoked by his parents? But it's all right for him to lose control when he has been provoked by his wife. So in this way, we're trying to help them see that, our culture that allows women to be respected should also remove women from having violence visited upon them. That if a man knows that he has to maintain self-control and self-restraint, even where he has been provoked by an elder, he has to have that same requirement and obligation in his relations to a woman. And so to make sure that we interrogate and make it problematic, this idea of what a man's rights are, even while using the cultural conversation. So here we're not saying, there's, in the West, we now know that it's not right to hit a woman. We're just using the purview of what we have already accepted within our own cultural standards to also insist that women have the same rights as well. And that actually, I think, is much more effective, because people don't want to hear about what another society has said is all right, but people are more willing to listen if they're told that even by your own norms, even by your own standards, what you're doing is unacceptable, and so it has to change.
Yeah, good point. In your opinion, what's the best approach towards religious authorities when promoting violence against women legislation?
I think that we leave a huge gap of work that we can do when we approach religious authorities around the issue of violence against women. In Nigeria, for example, in northern Nigeria where they have religious law, much of our laws are from the Maliki school, which is the most conservative of the Islamic schools. And when we want to have change, we just say, oh, this is the religious law that is practiced in the north and these people cannot change. And actually, when you look at them, it's hard to see how they can change. They dress in a particular way, they look so rigid and they look so strict. But, I mean, they go through decades, actually, of education before they become religious authorities. And I think it is in that domain that we have huge opportunity to influence them. Why don't we send them to Indonesia, where the religious law is so much more liberal, so much more conducive to promoting women's rights? Send the young students, provide them with scholarships. Who can turn down money? Send them there to get their education so that when they come back with new ideas. One of the most respected voices for more women's friendly interpretations of Islamic law is a classic case for this because he's Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, who actually now is the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. But when he wears another hat, is one of the most respected voices on religious interpretation of Nigerian Islamic law, of Islamic law in general, but especially for Nigeria. And he was trained in Sudan in a very particular school of thought, which is more conducive to women's rights. So in Nigeria now is always challenging the conservative schools and the conservative interpretations. We should multiply Sanusis. We should provide scholarships for men and women to get a particular kind of school of thought of Islamic law, a particular kind of Islamic interpretation, so that in time we will begin to see changes in the way laws are interpreted for women, and we'll begin to see laws interpreted in a way that's conducive to women's rights. Instead of challenging the status quo, we should be building the blocks for the future to be different. And this is something I really think we need to look for, how we source for funding and provide mechanisms that make it possible for young scholars, and especially the brightest minds, to get new information that provides new opportunities and freedom for women.
Here's a question of the century. How can women best attempt to win over male allies to advocate against violence against women and for women's rights?
I think that there are many moderate men, and there are many men that probably promote women's rights maybe even more than women do. I married such a person, so I know they exist. My husband, I was raised in a patriarchal Islamic family. In my family compound is a mosque that serves our community. My mother was second wife, and my father, was very interesting. I mean, men are, men I think are problematic. I mean, you can have a man, as in the case of my father, is a classic example, who he has multiple wives. I mean, he likes all the privileges that that the religion affords him in relation to women. But he was a big champion of his daughters. His nickname for all his daughters was Supergirls. I mean, he called all of us Supergirls. And actually, the women in our household now, his daughters, in many ways seem to be more present in the world, more confident about their place in the world, even than our brothers. And this I lay at my father's door. And so you have men having ambivalent motivations. And I think that what we need to do is always look to how for ways we can tap their motivations that is supportive of the women's rights agenda. We have to provide them with opportunities to reaffirm their commitment to women's rights. I mean, not necessarily their commitments to their wives' rights, maybe their commitments to their daughters' rights. Because many times it's difficult for them to promote their wives' rights, because that might limit their own privileges, and it's very difficult for men to do that. I mean, for many men to do that. But many men they are unwilling to see their daughters suffer. So to look for, how they can promote right to education, which is really oftentimes about the next generation. You know, ways for men to stand up for their daughters to go to school. One example is the issue of the children's bill, the children's rights bill that was that we were seeking to adopt across Nigeria. Many states in Nigeria have adopted this bill, but in northern Nigeria there's been a challenge, and I think that, you know, the challenge has been around the issue of local ownership. In northern Nigeria, actually, many families will marry the daughter off by the time she's 15 years old, and the Child Rights Act requires that women are not married off until they're 18 years old. So when the women's NGOs and the children's rights NGOs were negotiating with communities across northern Nigeria, the communities were worried that if their children are not married by the age of 15, the daughters could become spoilt, you know, could become open to influences that are beyond the control of the family, and then the family would lose the daughter, and she could become pregnant, she could have a boyfriend, you know, God forbid, you know, anything could happen. So when they were negotiating, the local communities were saying, okay, we don't need to maybe have the daughter married off at 15, but can we maybe have her married off at 16? And the child's rights people said, no, it has to be 18. And the women, the community said, if we have to take it or leave it, then we leave it. And that to me was sad. I think what we should have done is allow them to push their age to 16 and leave them for a few months, then come back and say, now it is 16. You know, across Nigeria it is 18. Even we could mention other Muslim societies, Muslim countries like in Senegal, where it might be also already 18. And then use that to pressure them to say, well, from 16, what about 17? You know, even no, actually, we say from 16, can we not look at 18 so that you join your brothers in Islam in Senegal and other countries? And then they would say, well, what about 17? And we say, okay, well, let's have 17. And then we go again for some time, then we come back. But the local ownership, as much as possible, we should keep it with them so that they feel like they have dignity, that they're recognized, their culture is recognized, even while their culture is being forced to change.
Yeah, good point. This is the 10th anniversary of the Women's Learning Partnership, in case you didn't know that. But what, you know, thinking about the organization a little bit, what value do they bring to your work, or certainly to other activists and advocates working for women's rights around the world?
Actually, I've known Manaz over 10 years. I met her in 1998, so it is about 12 years now. And when she created the Women's Learning Partnership, she told me about it, and I frankly didn't understand what she was saying. I just thought it's going to be very important work to promote leadership for women, especially women in Muslim societies where women are highly repressed. But I didn't really understand the unique approach that WLP has. And I've been privileged to have been part of WLP's family for the whole 10 years and to see what Manaz meant when she created the organization. Now in Nigeria, WLP's partner in Nigeria is another very impressive organization called Baobab for Women's Human Rights. And my organization, KIND, is actually currently, we just secured a grant from UNIFEM to promote women's political participation. But we did not secure the grant just by ourselves. The lead partner in this grant is Baobab, WLP's partner in Nigeria. And it's been an opportunity for my staff to really learn more about WLP. I mean, they know I've been on the board, that I work with WLP. We bring the materials and we use the materials in our own leadership training for my organization. But working with Baobab in partnership to implement this UNIFEM grant has been even an additional learning experience for us, because the Baobab staff come with us when we do training of women leaders who want to go into politics in Nigerian societies. They provide feedback to my staff about how we approach our work. And it's been a big challenge because their work in many ways is degrees more thoughtful, I would say, than KIND's work. And so sometimes my staff actually, and we also feel that there's a cultural difference in the way we approach our work. And my staff were saying to me, Hafsat, you know, we don't want to work with them anymore. Must we work with them? Because it's very challenging to work with an organization that has such a different way of working. And the last, recently I was in Nigeria in the summer, and I went with my staff, the management team and the program team, to a meeting with Baobab, which was to troubleshoot, to solve some very big problems that we were having. And we came out of the meeting. My staff had listened to Baobab giving us feedback, which was very useful for our own work. So it's going to make us a stronger organization and more effective in how we impact women's lives in Nigeria. And we were in the car park waiting to go. And I said to my staff, so what do you think? And they said, we go into the meetings with them and it's as if you go and you take a beating, because getting critical feedback is very challenging. But they said, we just will keep going back. And I have to say, I felt very proud of them, because I think that change is the most difficult thing that people can do. And Baobab's work is really about helping, and WLP's work is really about helping us take the tools to begin to change the way we relate to each other and we relate to other people. And I felt so proud of my staff that they were willing to be bold enough and courageous enough. They were so committed to Nigerian society that they were willing to take the critical feedback and have it inform their work so that it be better, so that we're better advocates for women, that we're better trainers of women leaders, and so that Nigeria has the possibility, through our work, Baobab's work, WLP's training of all of us, to do better work in our society. And, so now I have a greater degree of respect, much more respect for WLP. When I was coming for this board meeting, it involved cancelling a huge opportunity where I was going to be on the jury for an international award. But I just thought to myself that the work that WLP is doing is changing the world, is changing my world, and to be on their board is a privilege and an honor, and I had to do it. It's a small way for me to give back to WLP for the incredible work that they're doing around the world to improve women's lives.
There are many things, I suspect, that you could be doing with your life besides what you're doing. Tell me what motivates you to do what you do, and what difference do you hope you make?
I'm motivated by a woman who died at the age of 44, and at that time I was 21. My mom was an incredibly beautiful woman. Physically, she was incredibly beautiful. Now, my father, by the time she married my father, he was already quite a successful businessman in Nigeria, which is how, in those kinds of societies, how does a man get such a belle, And she saw him, she fell in love with him, and I'm sure she was very happy that she was going to marry a man that would be able to take care of her family. She was a high school graduate, and my father's dowry, when he married her, helped her to pay for her two younger sisters to go on to university. But she never had the opportunity. And yet, and when people saw her, what they saw was an incredibly physically beautiful woman. Because she was my mother, what I always felt about her was an incredible inner beauty. When my father ran for office, he ran to be president of Nigeria in 1993. He won the election, which was groundbreaking in Nigerian society for many reasons. It was from a part of the country from the south, but the majority people in terms of population were from the north. To win that election, those people had to vote for him, and they did. So it was a great honor for the family. But the military that was in control of Nigeria at the time decided that they didn't want a democratic system, so they put my father in jail. So this high school graduate, my mother, Kudi, became the leader of the movement for democracy in Nigeria. And what a leader she was. Even now, I feel very proud of her. She spoke on CNN, she spoke on BBC, she spoke on Nigerian radio in Yoruba, one of our languages, in Hausa, the language of the dominant population. She explained the arrogance of the military, their thinking, because being from a very successful family, the political rulers were often our very close friends, so we knew their thinking. The masses didn't really know. She explained it, she demystified the leadership. she explained that it was not to maintain order, as the soldiers said, but really because they controlled billions of dollars for which they were not accountable. Money that they were transferring to Switzerland, to all parts of the world, but not investing in Nigeria. She asked them to fight for democracy. She asked the women to leave their kitchens, to leave their household, to march on the streets. And because she was a high school graduate, not this powerful businessman, but a mother and a wife, common Nigerians listened and they fought. The trade unions fought. The market women fought. So when my father went into jail, the military's hope was to silence the movement. The movement actually increased octaves, much higher octaves than what my father could achieve. And my mom, did this. And then the military decided in 1996, after 2 years of our activism, to send a final and clearer message. Because, if the message of incarcerating the leader of the movement had not achieved much results, they decided to send a clearer message. And so they had a gun down on the streets of my country. In 1996, I was 21 years old, and I was a senior at Harvard University at the time. And I thought to myself, if my mom could have done this with her life and could have made such an impact in Nigerian society, it would be the biggest mistake of my life to allow the military's message to be the last word. So actually, within 24 hours of her death, I was on CNN, and I gave an interview, and I said, I will not let her down. And my whole motivation is that when I pass on, we're Africans, and so I'm Muslim, but actually my whole cosmology is actually more the African cosmology, which is that we go to an ancestral place when we die. And in fact, that my parents are even now in the land of the ancestors. So I expect that when I cross the gates to the land, my mom will be there, and we will sit down, and she will say, Hafsat, and I'll say, and she'll say, you did well. That really is my motivation. And, when now I work with women in Nigeria, I think, if this woman could do what she did, just imagine what you can do to help Nigeria. If we just realize our power, reclaim our power, and stand up for this country, all our problems, the poverty, the disease, all the conflict that all the international news report about Nigeria, that will be in the museum. If people want to see that about Nigeria, they would have to go and read newspapers in the past, because the country would have regained its dignity, we'll be taking care of our people. And I say this to the women all the time. And, the good thing is that because they lived in Nigeria at the time that my mom also lived there, or because our name is now like a legend, they know what I'm saying is not fiction, it's fact.
Your mom's very proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you do. Excellent.